What's new at WWDC 2019?
And what else is new at WWDC 2019? Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by NetComm, taking Australian technology to the global market. Welcome to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, where we talk to Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined as always by Alex Kidman, a man who doesn't know the meaning of the word sleep thanks to the US-based developer conferences. Alex, are you still awake? You still there?
Just 5 more minutes. I'll keep writing, I promise.
We're also joined this week by freelance technology writer for the ABC and AFR and podcast host at Byteside.com, Seamus Byrne, who's come to us straight from the San Jose Worldwide Developer Conference. Seamus, welcome to the show.
Really nice to be here. Well, I found the way to San Jose. I feel like I have to crack that joke. It's the first time I've come to WWDC, so why not?
Well, WWDC basically is the big news of the week, so we'll jump straight into it. So, Alex, it's that time of year again, WWDC. It's not quite WWF, but there were some big hits. What happened?
Yeah, so WWDC is Apple's big developer conference, and for most of this week, it will have been talking to developers about designing apps and working with new Apple software, but it always kicks it off with a keynote where it talks about upcoming Apple software and hardware. And the big consumer grade story this year, the one that's been grabbing everyone's attention, has been the so-called death of iTunes. And Apple came in with an almost comic angle, which is not Apple's usual style for this kind of thing, by talking about how kind of cluttered and ugly iTunes was. And then it introduced its new strategy. And Seamus, you're on the ground there in San Jose. What's new in killing iTunes?
Yeah, and look, you're totally right there, Alex. I feel like Craig Federighi, the guy who introduced this section, year after year, he's now becoming more confident to just crack jokes and have fun on stage. Like, he's just getting that confidence that no one's looking over his shoulder telling him stop trying to be funny dad on stage. And so, yeah, he cracked a whole bunch of jokes about going, let's stuff the calendar in there and let's stuff all these extra features in there. And then finally went, no, of course, that is a really bad idea. And instead pointed out that they're splitting out iTunes into 3 separate apps. It will be Apple Music, Apple TV, and podcasts. So, and I think Apple TV, of course, that's not just the TV shows. That will be movies, TV, all of that sort of that library of video content alongside Apple Music being the library of audio content. And that's where I think, some people have been a bit worried about the idea of, does the death of iTunes mean somehow that it's going to screw up our libraries? Now, migrating libraries can be a bit of a disaster sometimes. So
just a little bit, just a little bit.
But the suggestion at this point is that, Apple Music will be where all your music, if you have 35,000 songs sitting in some giant library, they should be sitting there in Apple Music when you upgrade to Catalina.
It's sort of work it's already done, though, because this has been the story for iOS devices for quite some time. It's all been in these separate contained apps anyway. So Apple's got a little bit of experience in getting this working, although where Apple is remaining very, very quiet is what happens to folks on older Mac or iOS equipment who can't or won't update. And, of course, what happens to the PC version of iTunes?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And I think, there are. I know that I have an iMac at home that I have no intention of upgrading because, there's been warning messages around at the moment, and I think I like this part of at least that the way their strategy has been that when I run an app that actually hasn't been updated to a 64-bit app version, now I currently get a warning that says the next version of macOS will not support this app. And it has basically flagged for me a bunch of reasons why I'm like, you know what, that iMac, which is now actually about a 5-year-old iMac, it's like that, I am not going to upgrade that. That is going to be the machine that stays in my house and that runs old things that will never run again on a future Mac, and that's just going to be that one's job.
Put it out in the porch in a rocking chair with a
Oh,
pipe.
bless
and,
it. Yep. So yeah, I think you're right that for that side of things, I mean, you look, older versions, they don't necessarily, apart from the odd security update, they don't necessarily keep updating things on older versions of Mac OS long into the future. But yeah, that Windows version, that's an I can't remember if they have actually launched Apple Music for Windows yet as a streaming service type thing, and whether that has incorporated all those library aspects, because I'm sure there are still plenty of people who own an iPhone who don't necessarily own a Mac, and so that's going to be a concern for some of them.
Indeed, and especially even for things like local backup, which is now going to just shift to Finder. Now, I think that's a great idea, not having to launch iTunes when you plug an iPhone in if you do like
Yes.
doing a local backup. But if I was a PC iTunes user, I'd be a little concerned right now. I have queried Apple, and at the time of recording, they're yet to get back to me. And I can totally understand this was their developer conference for their software. They're not going to suddenly say, and by the way, on Windows, that just was never, ever going to happen. But you touched on one of the other themes that I wanted to talk about, which was the and again, they've been through this with iOS before, the upcoming death of 32-bit apps once you switch to Catalina. There's going to need to be some fairly serious work done, I think, even for some quite big apps, before Catalina goes mainstream later this year.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done the rundown of what of the kind of key non-Mac apps are still floating in that weird limbo where I mean, I think part of putting out the warning messages sometimes it's a nice way to at least try to get the user base to start sending those queries to that third party company to say, excuse me, are you gonna update your app anytime soon, because I'm getting told that it's not going to work next time. So that can help a little bit, but yeah, I think a lot of the kind of overarching theme of that keynote and sort of a few of the things that I've been hearing about since then, it really sort of feels like Apple is like doubling down isn't the right word, but they really have spent this show with that relaunch of the Mac Pro talking about like their core ecosystem in a way that actually, I think particularly when we think about iPhone, the runaway consumer technology of the 21st century, it sort of pulled a lot of that focus. And this, in the first time in what, like literally 6 years since they last launched a real new Mac Pro, this show felt like they wanted to sort of focus so much on that idea of we are back in the game for serious creative professionals, and that those features are part of sort of trickling down through that ecosystem for people who care about Mac. And I think in that context, yeah, there's a lot of those details that are still sort of up in the air about what is that going to mean for sort of different things that still need to come to the party. But today felt like a really sort of, again, maybe confidence not the right word, but it felt like one of those days where they just were happy to really focus on going, you know what, like Mac, Watch, iPad, iPhone, this stuff all works together really well, and they could kind of sing from that song sheet in a way that they haven't been able to for that developer audience because of that gap in Mac Pro for the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, the app that always seems to spring up to me and really surprises me is the Updater for Adobe Cloud. And that's going to be a big app for that developer audience and for the people who are likely to buy the Mac Pro. And I know you were really, really hanging out for a Mac Pro. Are you going to take out that secondary mortgage that you'd need to buy one?
No.
So the kids are still going to uni.
Yeah, that's right. When
and not to scientific
I mean,
experiments.
it is a pretty machine. I'm not going to lie. I could think about selling that second lung. I do have one to spare at the moment, I guess. But yeah, I think they really. I mean, Creative Cloud is a really. I feel like that's probably Adobe just like leaving it to the last second, right? I hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think. Yeah, like the Mac Pro. I mean, in a lot of ways, for me, because it's funny. Way back in the day, I used to edit video. I used to kind of really need that sort of machine with all that extra grunt, and then we've sort of had that era now where a well-spec'd MacBook Pro was so close to a well-spec'd, to the not insanely expensive Mac Pro, that I've never felt like there was any justification for going out and finding the extra money, and for having that portability, everything sort of right there with me. That was all easy. This is that first time where you've seen that sort of announcement where there's so much power that they're sort of throwing into this thing that it does make you sort of go, oh my God, wouldn't it be great to have that kind of power sitting at my table again? Yeah, then you start looking at the price of the thing and you go, this is not made for me. I met a couple of, like a professional finisher and colorist for, Hollywood movies. I had a chat with a guy like that today, and another guy who's a cinematographer. And these are the kinds of people who look at that and go, oh yeah, like of course I will throw whatever money they want at this, because
I'll take
it
3.
instantly saves me hours of rendering, and that is money in my pocket.
They had a rare little misfire with that thing, though, with the monitor stand of all things. The audience didn't seem to like that so much as a price point.
I kind of missed the way that the throwaway line and the stand is $1,000. I was typing down the prices of, I'm like, okay, $5,999 for the Mac Pro. Okay, yep. $4,999 for the first, the entry level, well, not entry level, the first version of the monitor. $5,999 for the nano coated version of the monitor. And then I just kind of hear the like, in the room. And I'm like, what did I miss? And someone's like, the stand is $1,000. I was like, oh, okay. Yep. People felt that was a bit of a weird one. But again, it's so weird, isn't it? Because you got like, I did get a demo session with a side-by-side comparison of an ISO Color Pro CX319. I think so it's another kind of reference grade $6,000, $6,000 US monitor for these kinds of professionals. And the new Apple monitor blows it away. Like it's completely in a different class. And at the other side of it, they had this $43,000 Sony reference monitor that they mentioned during the keynote. And it really was that kind of a moment where you're like, those two things look a lot alike. Like you're starting to kind of try to nitpick the differences between this $6,000 monitor plus $1,000 stand and a $43,000 monitor. And that's where you're like, I guess I can justify why they've sort of said, well, a lot of professionals will stick this thing on a VESA mount, and we've got a separate VESA mounting bracket to kind of let people do that instead of committing necessarily to our version of the stand. But geez, it still stings when right there on the stage, everyone's like, oh.
What does it do for $1,000? Like, I must have missed something.
Well,
does it make coffee?
It's made out of that same crazy recycled aluminium, and it twists sideways and all those kinds of.
Oh, twist sideways. Oh, why didn't you say so? Oh,
now
only $1,000.
It used to be. It's made out of stuff that used to be iPhones, and it was designed by Johnny Ive. What more do you want, people? What more do you want?
Yeah, I can see Johnny's eyes lighting up at this point. Yeah. So I'm moving away from the Mac stuff. I thought what they were talking about with iPadOS was quite interesting, because as a Mac user for a long time, I've been frustrated that Macs have always, for a while, been put in the corner. It's it's iPhone this and iPad that, and they've even tried to turn Macs into iOS. They've felt like they've dumbed down the operating system a bit in places, but now they've gone, oh yeah, we need this iPadOS. Are they kind of conceding that maybe some things are right on the desktop that could come across to iPad? Are they going to make iPads a bit more like MacBooks?
Yeah, I think that's really a key thing here, is that instead of, like, for so long people have said, the iPad could be a really nice computer to take with me on the road, and I don't have to necessarily have the MacBook. In fact, maybe that's sort of almost that nice thing. Yeah, I can go back to having my crazy, Mac Pro, and then an iPad, which, one of the things I guess that was also sort of launched today was Sidecar, which is that way of using your iPad as a native second screen. There's been some third-party apps that have done that, but not very well. But, when it's baked into the OS, it's going to work a whole lot better. But having, iPadOS really seems like it's that way to say, we're now going to be able to give features that are desktop-like to the iPad without having to somehow shoehorn that into it being a part of the phone as well. It really felt due to create that little bit of separation. And there were so many sort of drag and drop and slide and split type features that had a really desktop vibe to them in the demo session of the kinds of things that they were giving to the iPad by creating this separation. That even things like custom fonts, right? Like it's kind of a little thing, but that is such a desktop thing that people really care about, is being able to go, yes, I want to install a whole bunch of fonts and have a font library so that when I'm using Word for iPad, I'm now actually able to use that kind of font listing like I would on a desktop instead of just being stuck.
What do you got against Times New Roman?
Look, I'm more of a Calibri guy myself,
What did Times New Roman ever do for us?
Look now, Adam, don't be Calibrist. That would be wrong. The jaw-dropping moment for me, though, was when they admitted that USB flash drives exist and that an iPad might want to talk to one. Because Apple, for the longest time, has said, if you want more storage, you've just got to buy the bigger model. And
I think I can hear Jobs spinning from here. Like, are they using his spinning body to power the new building or what? You're right. That is a big change.
I mean, I did like at least that they were showing off, as the demo thing. It was some little kind of cute little SanDisk USB stick that is, a native USB-C stick, because there's still a bit of a rarity out there. But, instead of showing off some kind of weird dongle attached to the end of the iPad for a normal USB one, they're like, yep, you can buy one now that will just slot straight into the end of there. And this was still in the Craig Federighi section of the show. So I think he kind of was giving a bit of the nudge and the wink to the idea of going, yes, files will now support a USB stick. And again, I like that he now at least has that license to kind of go, yeah, look, okay, we got there.
Eventually. Although I'm going to be really curious to see how far that back that stretches and whether or not people do come up with, Lightning to USB-A type adapters for that family of iPads, or if this is an iPad Pro exclusive feature. I haven't been able to dig into that as yet. Any insight on that?
Yeah, I haven't seen any of that sort of side of things demoed yet, but I do get the feeling that if you stick a USB-C to one of their adapter type things in there, then I see what you mean. The older iPads, because you have been able to get the adapters for Lightning that do let you, say, upload photos off an SD card. So yeah, I feel like because it's in the OS itself, it should support that, but I do not have a confirmation.
We'll have to wait and see, I suppose. In terms of supporting things, one of the other surprising, just almost throwaway moments was, by the way, got a PlayStation 4 controller or an Xbox controller? You can use it with the new version of tvOS. And that was a big moment in and of itself, I thought.
Yes, and it was like in that early part of the show, they were moving so quickly through some of these things because, it was a 2.25 hour keynote. And there wasn't that much dead time in there. I think they probably spent a little too long on Apple Pencil at one point, and I think they got a little overexcited about dark mode. I'm a fan of dark mode. I'm going to use it, but they really were focusing on, look how beautiful it is. And you're like, it's actually not that beautiful. It's just nice. It makes my eyes calmer at nighttime. That's great. And let's move on to all of the rest of the news you have to share.
You were just chomping at the bit for the Mac Pro, let's be honest.
Yeah, that was definitely part of the game at that point. But yeah, tvOS supporting Xbox and PlayStation. I think there's still the big issue for a lot of people out there who want better access for game developers to be able to create different kinds of games. You have chatted to some developers who've pointed out there's still a whole bunch of weird restrictions on Apple on how big the game package is allowed to be for an Apple TV and issues like that. But yeah, seeing things like Xbox and PlayStation controllers certainly gets rid of a lot of those issues where all we kind of had for a while were like weird, dinky, sort of really crappy switches and things on some of those controllers that were pure, Bluetooth phone type controllers. So that's a really nice step forward. And also the idea of multi-user support on tvOS part of that sort of little section as well, where, yeah, again, like as someone with kids in the household, that thing of, when my wife and I are catching up on crazy action television shows with ample violence. And then, and in that same queue, you've got like whatever the kids have been watching lately. Just being able to separate that a little bit would be really nice.
So how does that multi-user experience work? Because that was one thing that always frustrated me about the iPad is Apple would never put on the idea of fast user switching. And the reason why is because they wanted everyone in their house to have one. They didn't want you to share. They wanted you to give up. It's too hard to share one with my kids. You can all have one each. What's it going to look like on the Apple TV? I'm envisioning like that login page for Netflix where it says, okay, who in the house is watching this? Is it that simple?
I feel like it's going to be a lot like that. I had been hoping I could sneak into the tvOS session for developers in the next couple of days, but I think I've ended up with sort of an appointment clash because I am really intrigued on how they're going to do it. I actually, when we got to the point of iPadOS launching, I was really hoping that they were going to announce multi-user support for iPad in a way that, again, it's like, okay, it makes sense that a phone doesn't necessarily support multi-user, but the iPad, that would be a really great feature. And I'm kind of still quietly holding out hope that by the time we get to, the actual launch of iOS 13, they often have that couple of extra bits up their sleeve so that when you get to the hardware launch days, they're able to say, and this is going to be part of, the new software. That I really feel like iPad multi-user would be a great feature that makes sense as part of separating that out.
I would be shocked. It'd be great, but I would be absolutely flabbergasted if they did that because, like I said, it just goes against the Apple ethos of just buy one for everybody.
It's a feature in the school environment already. So that's where I'm just like, they can do it. There's no good reason not to do it. Please stop giving people like you the excuse to just slap them with the idea they're going, you're just trying to make us buy more things.
I'll find something else to slag them off for, man. I got no shortage. It's a long list.
They also, of course, alongside all the other OS updates, they also updated WatchOS, and they're still coming up with new features to throw in there, although some of them we've seen on other smartwatches or we've seen other applications that do this kind of thing. Skipping aside from the new Faces thing, I thought that the way they're doing the hearing check is kind of neat.
Yeah, that was. It was just a nice little thing where, again, you can have, that you can set that up as one of your little complications if you're the kind of person who works in that environment where you want to be just keeping an eye out. And, or just to be able to activate it and just do a bit of a check on have things gotten really loud where I am right now, and therefore I should be doing something to make sure that my ears are okay, and also just that alert type system so that it does do that background.
So hang on, is it checking your hearing or is it checking the environment to see if the environment's bad
checking
for your
the
hearing?
Environment to see if it could potentially be doing damage to your
hearing. I
hearing.
assumed it was like a hearing test for you, like once a week ago. Can you hear this? Can you hear this?
Well, yeah, that would be another handy thing.
Instead, Uncle Tim is listening.
Yeah,
he's looking out for you.
The thing that really I liked about the WatchOS update today was like a number of steps towards trying to actually make WatchOS a lot more independent, so that potentially, maybe like it probably is a bit early this year, but like the launch of independent WatchOS apps, which means it doesn't need to have something installed on the iPhone that it's associated with. And then also things like the streaming audio API, which is that way to finally sort of go, hey, Spotify, hey, Audible, you can now do native streaming directly to a watch, that is on its own, the little kind of phone chip that they can have in them now. Those kinds of features to really start to separate out the watch from the phone in a way that feels like maybe it's that one or two generations further down the road. You could go, you know what? Yeah, I'm an Android user, but actually, the Apple Watch is a really good watch for the health and fitness features, and I don't need to actually have it attached to an iPhone. It just starts to live on its own. That's kind of, it's a nice journey for it to go on, because I think that's for a long time that's been a bit of a kind of kludge when they've tried to make some of the things work natively, but now that we're getting to version 6 of, I think, of that operating system, clearly they're starting to get to that point where they can make it kind of run itself, and the power of, I guess, the chip, that tiny little chip that sits inside a watch, is getting good enough to start to stand on its own feet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of smartwatches, as regular listeners will know, and I've long held the Apple Watch is actually the best of them. But I'm hoping that this shifts them from that kind of, yeah, it's a nice thing to have, but the core notifications thing any watch does, and they haven't shifted it so far beyond that. I'm hoping the inclusion of third-party apps is that thing that can kick it up that gear into being you really want to have one of these.
Yeah, and I think they've really focused, definitely the last couple of years. They sort of, I guess, concentrated on that whole health space, that they sort of seemed to see that they were that one set of apps that were working really well was the fitness and activity tracking, but then they started adding a lot of those sort of features for things like fall detection to kind of hit a certain market of person who wants to be able to have that sort of tracking in their life. Even things like today, it was really notable to have the whole, like, a lengthy discussion about menstruation tracking as part of this keynote. And I even saw it on like the 6 o'clock news here in the US, where there are plenty of debates going on right now about women's women's right to kind of control their own birth cycles, to have just a perfectly rational and clear discussion on being able to give women a much better control over the way in which that they can track their own menstrual cycles. I thought was just such a great piece of, a great moment in the show to just go, this isn't a big deal. We're just offering a really useful health tool to women.
Yeah, it was an excellent addition to that overall health story that they've been telling for a while. Although I don't think we've got the heart rate tracking here that they announced last year yet. So maybe there might be a bit of a wait on some of these things before they come down under. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. One of the other big themes that they had around this, and talking around the hearing check, reminded me that they said, oh, by the way, even though it's listening, we're not listening, was this whole idea of privacy and this new sign in with Apple feature that they're going to build in as well.
Yeah, I really feel like, personally, I feel like this is going to be, like, in 2 years, we're going to realize this was the announcement of the show, because this is such a direct attack on login with Facebook and login with Google, for people who, it's convenience, right? You don't want to have to create an account in every single bloody service you sign up for. But we now kind of have a much clearer understanding that is just feeding data into these giant pools of data that Facebook and Google love to kind of keep just gathering on all of us. So the idea of having a new option for signing with Apple that is, again, that same simplicity, but none of the tracking attached to it. Having, if you're an iPhone user, to just have Face ID, being able to directly kind of do the login for whatever service you might have attached that to. But also the random email feature is, I think, that's going to sing to so many people. The idea that it will create a completely randomized email address that forwards to your actual email address, so that whatever you've signed up for will not be able to somehow throw your email address into some giant database of email addresses. And you can easily at any point in future go, yeah, I'm cutting them off, and I know they will not be able to track me down and keep throwing random crap at me.
But it's even bigger than that from a security perspective, because a lot of the security breaches recently are because people are silly and they reuse passwords. So just for example, you use the same password with Google as you do with Facebook, and your Facebook login is your Google email address. So then Google gets hacked and they get your password. And so they've got this list of passwords and they go, all right, well, we'll go and try these email addresses and passwords everywhere else. And they go over to Facebook and they put in your Google email and password and they get in. And people go, oh, my Facebook's been hacked. No, it hasn't actually been hacked. They just got in because you were stupid enough to have the same email address and the same login. So by generating random email addresses like that it's going to wipe that out, because even if there is an attack where someone gets those credentials, you will not be able to use them anywhere else. That's
a great point. Yeah, absolutely. And and again, it's like for most companies, like we just want to know, yes, I will have a relationship with you. And if I am a good, if I'm a good business that creates a good relationship with you as a customer, then, I'll make money and you'll get a nice service that you want and everything is going to be rosy, instead of this idea that, well, I have to start generating large pools of data if I ever am going to make money through ads or whatever.
Although Apple's being very Apple here, I did wonder how they're going to drive take-up of this, and checking into it. The sign-in with Apple feature is going to be mandatory for any app that offers a third-party sign-in option already. So it's kind of...
mandatory that you have to use that, or mandatory that they have to offer it?
The app developers have to include it.
Oh, okay. They're not going to force you to use it.
No.
Because that sounded very Apple.
But they are strong-arming their way into that market that way.
Into the market.
And I guess the flip side of this, of course, is you're putting a lot of trust in Apple. Because if they have a major security breach, if that core Apple ID is compromised in some way, and, we've seen that can be socially engineered, Apple is not immune to this kind of thing, then, as is already the case, of course, with a sign-in with Google or a sign-in with Facebook, you can be in trouble across a whole bunch of services.
But yeah, I mean that is really a big part of Apple's pitch right now, is the idea that is what they're offering. And by God, I am sure that they're well aware now that they're like, man, if we lose faith because we have some mega breach, boy, are we gonna be in trouble.
But Apple does not admit on comment, rumors, speculation, or security breaches. I'm sure will be the line that would be used at that time. But hopefully, of course, that will not happen.
And look, and just another kind of related thing there was an update to their location sharing feature, where recently came out that I can't remember who wrote it. Was Bloomberg maybe, where they were kind of picking up on the fact that there were a whole bunch of apps that have been abusing background tracking to kind of just give themselves more and more kind of little bits of data that would help to fingerprint somebody, and in that process just try to make them a more valuable advertising target, which is so much about what this whole fingerprinting thing is about. But that they've kind of are updating this now so that there will be things like you can allow only once for a location sharing feature, which would mean that the next time that app wants it again, it has to specifically ask for access to it again. And then also a background tracking alert, so that you can actually have things set up. So it's like, anytime this app wants to, in the background, drip feed a bit of data, let me know, and then I'll say if it can or not. And even things like stopping them from using Wi-Fi and Bluetooth as another fingerprinting sort of system. So like they're really trying to keep... It's like their whack-a-mole version, where they're trying to publicly point out, I guess, that whenever somebody's trying to find a way to abuse what is a fairly locked down system, that they're going, yep, you know what? And now we're getting rid of that loophole as well, to keep giving you, the user, more tools to say no when someone tries to get more information, which is kind of cool.
On that privacy front, one of the more interesting features that they announced is an enhancement of the whole Find My iPhone experience via Bluetooth tracking, that they're going to send out individual pulses every once in a while so that they can kind of know where devices are, even if they're offline, which on the surface sounds really good. But the more I thought about it, the more, and maybe I'm being a little bit paranoid here, but the more I got slightly concerned about its potential use for things like oppressive regimes, where Apple might be obliged to comply with a law, or just, straight up police tracking kind of purposes. Because it's not even going to be the case of, oh, well, it's off the network. I'm safe. I'm secure. I'm not being watched. Well, actually, you sort of are.
Yeah, look, that's an interesting point. It's definitely a great feature because they focus on the idea that it's for laptops in that way, where you can't just ring your laptop and force it to kind of ring loudly for somebody to find it lost in the garden of a park somewhere. But it makes a lot of sense in that laptop context. I think when they first shifted the way that, when you sort of say, I want to turn off Wi-Fi, and then people discovered, oh, it's actually not technically turning off the Wi-Fi. It's just not looking for Wi-Fi, but it's still sending out Wi-Fi signals, and people are like, that's kind of weird. Can I just actually turn things off? I think that's definitely an area where, for those hardcore privacy narcs, that this is 100% the kind of thing that they would want to sort of say, well, what if I just want to say, you know what, I'll take the risk. I'll let my laptop get lost if I'm that stupid. And instead, please let me just completely turn it off. And maybe we'll find out that there is going to be that kind of a setting where by default it's on. That whole pulsing system is going to be on. But if you really care, you can go into your settings and shut that down.
Smart Money says the Chinese model of these devices will not let you shut that down. Well, that just about wraps up our WWDC special episode of Vertical Hold. What do you think? Are you excited by the changes in the various Apple OSs? There's so many of them right now. Are you going to be lining up to buy a Mac Pro and get that third mortgage along the way? Let us know what you think via Twitter or the Vertical Hold Facebook page. Thanks to Seamus for making the time to join us for the show.
You're very welcome. I'm going to go fall in my bed, which is 4 feet away now.
Thanks everyone for listening. We're on a big push this year, as we keep saying, to reach more people. So thanks if you've given us a shout out on social media. If you can give us a review on your podcast platforming of choice and help spread the good word. Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by NetComm, taking Australian technology to the global market.
I'm there. All right.
You didn't update to Catalina, did you?
No. Yeah, I'm running the beta right now. What's the problem?
And there goes the podcast.